let's get started. So I'm Marguerite Crespillo. Welcome back to Tuesday Tune-Ups. And today we're going to talk about how to create a seller net sheet. You know, I'm always fascinated by how many agents don't know how to create a seller net sheet, or they always just rely on or refer it to a title company to do. And honestly, too, to me, what the net sheet has done for me and has created is a way to get around the entire commission conversation, because I'm going to show you how I break it down to a seller. And we're going to talk about all the important things that you want to make sure that you include on a net sheet. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying this is an old presentation, but the content and the information is still the same. As I was mentioning when you guys first hopped on, I was working and updating the numbers in the presentation last night, and my entire hard drive on my computer freaked out. So I had to pull the presentation from my laptop, order a docking station. But as I was saying, life is what happens when you're busy planning, right? Real estate, you're always having to find a way to pivot and to make changes whenever you need to. So raise your hand. How many of you guys have had that conversation initially out of the gate? What's your fee? What's your commission? What's your percentage? What's your split, right? You've had that conversation, and it's always an awkward kind of silence. You don't know what to say. You don't know how to say it or anything like that, right? And so frequently what I'll say is well, what we're going to do is we're going to sit down and go over all of the costs of selling. You might remember when you bought this home that the fees were all paid by the seller. Well, now guess what? You're the seller, right? So we're going to sit down, go over everything, go over all the fees, because it's not just our commission that is being charged to them, correct? So if you think about this, when we go through and talk about all of the fees, people go, oh, well, on average, it's 6% or 8% or whatever that number is. And the average consumer, the average person, frankly, horrible at math, and they don't necessarily know, well, let's see, is it 8.2? Is it 7.4? Is it what is that times 400,000? I mean, it takes a long time to calculate that in your head. Would you not agree? And so what we're going to do is talk about how to prepare a net sheet, not only in how to prepare a net sheet, but how to make sure you're always preparing for the worst case scenario. So the one thing that I learned in my real estate career, to me, is I assume that nobody else is doing their job. So I literally assume that nobody else has been taking care of it or doing what they need to do, and that it's going to be my responsibility to make sure everything's happening. That doesn't mean I don't have extraordinary vendors and people that I work with, but I assume that no one else is doing their job. So let's talk about why I should prepare my own net sheet and how this can genuinely save you money in commissions. Number one, the numbers are more accurate, and it prepares your sellers for potential problems, which we're going to talk about. And honestly, it really definitely can preserve your commissions. And the value is always in the conversation and how important that conversation is. Okay. So you guys may know, if you've followed me for any period of time, I'm a checklist freak. I love, love, love checklists. They're how I create consistency in my business, by doing the same thing over and over again. I learned this from one of my favorite books when I first got into real estate, called The E-Myth, The Entrepreneurial Myth, by Michael Gerber. And in there, he talks about how to McDonaldize your business. And a lot of times when people hear the word McDonald's, they think of cheap, gross fast food, right? But what McDonald's has done, and they were one of the very first ones to do it, is create a system where everything is consistent. What you do know is, while it's not great food, anywhere you go in the world, a Big Mac is the same. And the Big Mac is the same, and any level of age or experience can create it, because they've made the system so simple. Does that make sense? So you can see in a McDonald's a 16-year-old working, and then you can see a retiree in their 60s working. And they can easily pick up and adapt to doing the same thing every time. That's why they call it McDonaldizing your business. So this is my checklist. It's an estimated seller net sheet checklist. This isn't the actual net sheet, but this is the checklist that I utilize to determine what the different costs are and things like that. Again, you guys, please don't take into consideration the numbers. This is an old checklist from about 15 years ago, but the content and the information is still very much the same. So how you're going to prepare this net sheet, and you can do it utilizing this checklist, which I encourage, and then you can actually go in and create it in an estimated seller net sheet, which is inside CAR forms if you're here in California. If you're in other states, I assume it's in your forms where you can create an estimated seller's net sheet, but I'll show you one when we get towards the end. So what I'm doing is I'm going over all kinds of information. I'm first of all determining an estimated sales price, okay? And then this next one is really important because you have to ask these questions of your seller. And for some reason, people are so uncomfortable asking these questions, but you got to know this information so that you can help avoid a lot of common speed bumps or issues with a transaction. For the last 12 or 13 years, you guys have all only been in an up market. So you haven't really seen values start to decline or things change. But now that the market is shifting a little bit, you might see that. So that's why it's important to know what loans do they have against the property? What is their mortgage balance? Somebody who just bought their house a year ago with an FHA loan is probably not going to owe a whole lot less than what they paid for their home. Somebody who bought their house 10 years ago, but has done 2 or 3 refinances and pulled money out, again, might owe more than you think. So let's just say, for example, that it's $500,000 sales price. And we say, hey, what is your loan balance? Oh, my loan balance is 400. Now, what do you think that the seller thinks as far as equity in their home? How much equity do you think they have? You guys want to type in the chat box real quick? And in their mind, they're going to sell the house for 500. They owe 400. How much equity do they have? Anybody? Is everyone still asleep from the weekend? So type in the chat box real quick. Exactly. They think that they owe $100,000 on this property, right? Or they're going to walk away with 100,000. Is that true? No, they're not going to walk away with 100,000. So we want to know what the outstanding loans are. We also want to know if they have any liens or judgments. I don't necessarily say that first, but I'll ask about, have you done any home improvements in the last couple of years, like solar or windows or new heat and air? Many times those are put a loan on their home, and you don't find out till you get to close of escrow down to the wire, and you find out, oh, they had a second on the house for $22,000 that can impact everything that is going to happen moving forward. I'll also ask, do you have any child support liens? Do you have any judgments? Do you have anything like that on your home? And people are uncomfortable asking these questions, but I feel like it's essential to being able to help them. I'm not trying to embarrass anybody, but what we don't want to have happen is we don't want to get down to the wire and find out there's a child support lien of $100,000 and we just lost the sale, right? So the next thing that we're going to estimate is we're going to estimate title and escrow fees. These are very easy to get. Most of the title companies have apps now. If you're in an attorney state, you can get estimates for the attorney's fees. The escrow fees, again, are something that is pretty common on the app. You can reach out. You could also ask your title officer to put together a net sheet and use those numbers to prepare your own. Why do I not use the title companies for net sheets? Because they don't necessarily know everything that I know about that property at the time that I want to know it, right? So what I mean by that is I could order one before a listing appointment, but I might not have all of the details that I'm going to get at that listing appointment. So I want the ability to be able to add the things that I think are important, such as, are there typically there's got to be brokerage fees, right? So we're going to put that in. Whatever you charge in your area, I'm going to show you mine, how I do it at the end. Recording fees are typically, now they're anywhere from $200 to $250, right? Courier, FedEx fees. Again, these are all estimates of common fees that are part of the transaction. You can update this, and I have a editable one. You can update this and with whatever it is for your market, right? Marketing fees. Typically back in the day, I used to charge a $4.95 marketing fee, which I stopped doing when the market changed, but I'm actually thinking about going back to implementing that. Home warranty, look at the home warranty. Here's what's important about home warranties, you guys. There's so many different companies out there. Some are great, some are not great. Their fees vary and their upgrades vary, and what's included in their base package varies. So some, for example, include heat and air. Some don't include heat and air. Some, you know, an add-on might be a pool, an add-on might be a well, or things like that, or roof. So you want to look at those. And I always want to prepare my client for the worst case scenario, as if they had to pay for everything, right? And then the bonus is, if we negotiate a good offer where some of those things are paid by the buyer or whatever that is, now you look like a hero. I'd rather go in and tell them they're going to end up with less money and bring them more money to the table than tell them they're going to get more money and come to the table with less money, right? Under promise, over deliver. There are things like reconveyance fees, home warranty we talked about, transaction fees, depending on the type of loan, whether you can charge a transaction fee or not. Well inspection, if it's applicable, right? Do they have a well on their property? Are you making sure that they know that these costs many times are asked to be paid for by the seller? Well, septic inspection. In our contracts, it's funny because it would say in our contracts here, you can check yours locally, it would say to get a septic inspection, but it doesn't say anything about getting it pumped. Well, I always want to have it pumped too. Like, I don't want to move into a house with somebody else's stuff in their own septic tank, right? So you always want to make sure what that cost is. Termite inspection, if applicable, and pest inspection, whatever you want to call it. Re-inspection, they typically charge a fee when they inspect, and they charge a fee when they re-inspect, right? And then also, are there actually going to be years that you're going to need to have required? We just had a situation. I advised the seller to get the pest report up front. I advised him several different times. He didn't want to do it. No, I don't think I have any. I'm like, you might just get it done. Of course, he didn't. We get into contract, for 2 weeks into contract, and the pest report comes back with almost $5,000 worth of work, right? Now, luckily, we were able to negotiate for him not to pay all of that. But again, these are reasons why we are the professional, and it's up to us to encourage, right? Strongly encourage our sellers to do what they should do. Is it going to require a roof inspection and a certification? You're going to estimate that. Are there going to be roof repairs that might be needed? Estimating that, right? HVAC inspection, is that going to be required or not? Chimney inspection. The new one now is environmental risk and hazards report. That is typically required. It's $100. Another thing to be paying attention to closely right now, you guys, is outstanding taxes, if they're behind in their taxes. Now, if they have an impound account, that's not normal, but if they don't, it's something to think about. Also, interest due. When did they make their last mortgage payment? Whenever they made their last mortgage payment, let's say they made it on the 5th, and keep in mind that mortgage payments are paying the interest in arrears. So when you make your payment on March 1st, it's paying the interest for February, right? So typically at closing, there will be prorated taxes that need to be paid. Is there a county transfer tax? In our county, it's $1.10 per thousand. Check your county for what is required in your county. Is there a city county transfer tax? And now we have a couple of areas that have a transfer tax for the community, like Del Webb and parts of West Roseville have a transfer tax that can be significant. And if you've missed it or didn't realize it, these are all the things, you guys, when you miss these things somewhere in a transaction, that's where you're ending up eating it. It's eating up your commission. Because they'll go, well, you didn't warn me about that. You didn't tell me about that. Next thing you know, you're giving up $1,500, $3,000 of your commission. Here's what I'll tell you about me personally. I don't ever, ever, ever cut my commission if I didn't make a mistake. If I didn't screw up. Now, if I screwed up and made a mistake, I write the check all day long, and I don't ask somebody else to kick in part of that. Nothing makes me madder than an agent who missed something, transfer tax or something on the net sheet, and now we're at the end of the wire and she wants me to split it. I'm like, no, I didn't make that mistake. That's your mistake, right? If I screw up, I'll write the check. If you screw up, you're writing the check. Because here's what I know. If you have to write a check, you won't make that mistake again, will you? Right? So that's where you have to really seriously think about it. So transfer taxes are important. FHA, VA fees, those have kind of gone a little bit by the wayside. drawing fees. But what you can see at the end of the day is how important these different fees are, right? So again, prepare a minimum of 3 with different price ranges is what I will typically do, right? I will pull the tax record to get an idea of outstanding loans if I can. It's a great way to do that. Title fees, we've talked a little bit about this from company to company, so I encourage you to obtain a few fee schedules of your favorite title people. Escrow fees, look closely at these as more and more banks are using out-of-area companies. So if you're working on bank-owned properties, it's really important. You guys aren't really seeing that, and you haven't seen it in a while, but as they start to come up, we are seeing them requiring you to use their escrow company, and their fees are always very high. You'll also notice that in some of the relocation companies or some of these like HomeLight and some of these other companies that are referring you leads, they are recommending and encouraging you to use their services. And what we don't always know is how different their services are. Brokerage fees, what are you guys in fact charging? That's completely up to you, right? We can't say that there's anything in particular. I typically charge 6%. I've even on occasion charged 7%. I usually keep more of the listing side than I give to the buyer's agent. There's controversy about that. That's okay. Recording fees, pay attention to how many loans are on the property. Keep in mind that on recording fees, if there is a first, a second, and a third, those recording fees might be significantly different, okay? Courier FedEx fees. Now we're also seeing a lot of the title companies charging wire fees. Not only is the escrow company charging a wire fee to wire it out, many times your bank is charging a wire fee to have it wired into your account, which I think is insanity, but it is what it is. Again, demand fees, how many loans will need demands. Other things to think about, again, marketing fees. So again, back in the day, I used to charge a $4.95 marketing fee, and I am actually looking at going back to that. And yes, that is in addition to the commission you charge. Home warranty, have various brochures handy. Do you have a transaction coordinator? What is that fee? We talked about well inspection, country properties, septic inspection to get it pumped. Termite inspection and re-inspection. Again, as I mentioned, a lot of these companies now charge a fee to inspect it. Then the work gets done, they charge a fee to re-inspect. So you want to take that into consideration when you're going through this, okay? Roof inspection and certification. There was a company that used to do roof certs or roof inspections for free all the time, but they got taken advantage of in many ways. So now they charge a fee to do a roof inspection and a certification and get these. And many of these inspections that you can get done up front, the better, right? But a lot of sellers, it's not as common in our market, in the Bay Area market and some other parts of the country. It's very common for all of these inspections to be done up front, which is great, but it's not as common in our market. It's starting to change a little bit, but you definitely have to have that conversation for sellers around getting these inspections done. Natural hazards report, home inspection, repairs. There's always something that comes up, even on an as-is property. I can't tell you how many times I've had this conversation where the seller says, I absolutely want to sell it as is. We go, okay, well, you have the right to say that. But keep in mind, the buyers still have the right to get their inspections done. And once those inspections are completed, that buyer still has the right to ask for repairs. Doesn't mean we have to do it. It means as a seller, you have the right to say yes, no, or maybe. Yes, I'll do it all. No, I'm not doing anything. Or tell you what, I'll meet you in the middle. Anymore, I'm much more convinced that I would rather offer a credit in lieu of repairs. And the reason is because here's what happens. The seller says, oh yeah, I'll paint the eaves. I'll take care of that leak in there. And what do? They get their buddy Billy Bob, comes out there with duct tape. They just find any old paint in the garage and they paint the trim. And now you have an upset buyer, right? So I encourage whenever possible to actually have a credit in lieu of repairs. Now, of course, that depends on, a lot of different variables, but it's something to think about. Again, we talked about outstanding taxes, outstanding interest due, county transfer tax, again, depends on the county. City transfer taxes varies by city. And then now you haven't been seeing this for a long time, but now you might estimate buyers' closing costs. What do I mean by that? I mean that you may see more and more buyers now asking the seller to pay closing costs or to pay money towards a buy down or different things like that. So again, I always want to estimate worst case scenario, okay? And so I will throw that in the net sheet. And if it doesn't happen, I always tell the seller, I said, look, if you don't pay these fees, that's just more money in your pocket. Our goal is to negotiate for you to pay as little of these fees as possible, right? But I would rather prepare them up front so they're prepared. So we're going to give you two scenarios. Again, I know you guys can't even relate to these prices because they're a lot lower, but there are parts of the country where this is pretty common, right? So we're going to look at two different scenarios. We're going to look at an FHA offer and a conventional offer. And I want you guys to understand how important it is to compare the differences in these offers, number one, for your client, but why it's so important to look at the difference many times in the net sheet that the title companies may do versus what we do. So we have a scenario here with FHA, sales price at $225, seller pays title escrow, city county transfer tax, and a termite clearance. Over here, we have conventional, sales price $225, split escrow and title fees, buyer's closing costs 3% of sales price, and a termite clearance. Now, there's going to be a big difference in the bottom line to these, right? And this is why it's so important when you are talking to a seller that you explain to them not to get so hung up on the sales price, but to focus on the bottom line. Because sometimes sellers get really hung up in, well, I want my house to sell for a minimum of $500,000. Well, they could get $500,000 from two different offers and net less money on one than the other, correct? So understanding this helps you a lot when it comes to preparing your seller and negotiating. So look at these two different examples. One is from the title company, right? And one is one that I prepared. Can you see the big difference here? It's a difference of almost $3,000. Okay. Now, in a higher sales price, it's going to be dramatically different. Why? Because the title company didn't know about a lot of different things. Okay. They didn't know about estimated roof work or estimated fees to the buyer or different things like that. So it can be a pretty significant difference, right? And so if we look at that difference, now I want to go in and show you, let me see if I can pull it up real quick. This is, let me share this screen just a minute. I got to stop sharing screen. I'm a little all over the place because, again, I don't have my normal computer system here. Well, just a minute, guys. I want to show you this. Oh, no, don't leave the meeting. Trying to figure out how to share this particular screen. Just a minute. Share. There we go. Okay. So this is the form. Share. Okay. Now, can you see it? Can you see the net sheet here?
Yes.
Okay. But let me move the screen so you don't see all your faces on top of it. Okay. So here is how I will typically do this. I will go into car forms, whatever forms you guys use throughout the country, you can go look at that. And I use the estimated seller proceeds. So when I am sitting in front of a seller, what do? I put this net sheet together, and typically I'll put 2 or 3 depending on the price points. And I will say, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you guys remember when you bought the home, all of the fees and commissions were paid by the seller. Well, now, so there's a combination of fees that I'm going to break down for you and show you, which includes a few things. Number one, if we were to sell your home for $500,000 and you had a loan balance of $300,000, we have things like title, escrow, city county transfer tax, home warranties, commissions. I've also broken down if we had to pay extra things for corrective work or buyer's closing costs. And once everything is said and done, you are going to walk away with $162,550. Does that sound like a number that you were prepared for? They'll go, oh, well, we were hoping to get a little bit more. I said, well, we have a few different price points, but it's really going to depend on what the market will bear. You guys, I don't sit down and go, my commission is 6%. 3.5 to me, 2.5. I don't break this down. I always say, this is the total cost of selling your home. I always overestimate, because I'd rather tell you you're going to get less money and you end up with more money than less money. So I've put in a couple buffers here. If they don't have to be paid, then that's more money in your pocket. I've estimated as if we had to pay $1,000 for work on a home inspection. I've also put as if we had to pay $1,000 towards closing costs, right? This way it comes down to, here's what you're going to walk away with, not so caught up in this. Now, if they come back and they say, well, can you reduce your commission? What I will typically say is, what's a number that you feel comfortable with? You guys, here's the rule. Negotiating 101. The first one who speaks loses. What many of you guys are doing is you are instantly putting 5% here, if that's what you want to do, or 4% or whatever. And the minute they ask you, you're already willing to drop it down to the lowest common denominator. I had somebody who I said that to recently. I said, what are you comfortable paying in fees? They go, well, would you be willing to take 5.5? Okay, right? Or I even, one of them, I came back and I said, okay, I'll meet you in the middle, 5.75, right? People always want to feel like they got a little bit something, but I'll be honest with you, in working with the majority of my clients are people that I know, people that I've worked with, people that know me, like me, and trust me. They are typically not asking me to reduce my commission. And frequently, many times, you guys are using that as what you think is a hook to get the listing. So you think, well, if I reduce my commission, I'll get the listing, right? And that's not always the case. We recently had a scenario where the client had asked for a commission reduction. We agreed to it. He ended up actually going with another agent who charges full 6% commission, because that agent was a better salesman in that scenario. He showed more value in what he had to offer. Now, keep in mind, the net sheet is not the first thing you're going to an appointment with, is it? You're going in and you're doing your presentation, you're getting to know them, you're utilizing a client discussion checklist and asking a lot of questions and figuring out what's important to them long before you get to the net sheet. But many agents lead with the net sheet. And keep in mind, there can only be one low-cost leader. If you guys think about it, how many of you have reduced a commission and that client ended up being the most difficult, challenging commission? You ended up earning your commission. Jessica's like, hey, me. You ended up earning that commission 10 times over, right? And not getting paid what you really deserve. We even had a situation where we had a client, we were in at 6%. His house wasn't selling. He was like, well, I'm dropping the price, so you should drop the price. We ended up agreeing to reduce it. And then I kept reminding him all the way through the transaction as he got challenged, and we spent hours and hours on the phone. I said, this is what we do for our commission. This is why we earn it. And he goes, yeah, I understand now. Right? Like most clients think that all we do is put a sign in the yard and then the whole world shows up and writes offers, and we did nothing, right? All we did was cruise along and see the last, end of that net sheet. So you can go in here. The nice thing about this one is you can go in and you can easily change this, right? You can change it to 550 and it's going to adjust everything for you, right? And you can change this easily. So I encourage you guys to utilize this particular net sheet, but use the checklist that I have. And I'm happy to, you guys, if you're already getting my email, I'll shoot me an email in the chat and I will send it out to you. So this is a thing where you can see how easy it is to go in and make the changes that you need to make. Does that make sense? What kind of questions do you guys have? Hello? No questions? You guys got all this figured out?
Well, I was going to ask what happens if you are confronted about your commission, but you went over it. So
there you go. And, there's lots of different ways. Am I going to say I never reduced my commission? No, I do. But I try to make it few and far between, because you guys, we do work really hard and we only get paid. What I told this client, as I said, we only get paid on results. We don't get paid for time. So I could put months and months and months, years in some cases, into a transaction, and it might never close. Or when it does finally close, I've worked so hard on that deal But then the opposite could happen. You have deals where you don't have to put in a whole lot of time and effort and energy, and they go really smooth like silk. Here's what I tell my client. I say, you know what? Tiger Woods makes things look easy. Masters make things look easy. We're very good at what we do. And our goal is to make this as seamless and hassle-free as possible, which is going to feel like we didn't earn our money. But we're like a duck in the water, right? Our little feet are hustling underneath. They don't necessarily see the feet that are going on and all the stuff that's going on behind the scenes. Also, we're not so good at telling people what we're doing. We're like secret agents, right? When you have a challenge you've overcome, you need to remind them. You know, so like I recently had a situation too where my seller, I warned him not to talk to agents or buyers when he was there. The buyers ended up showing up to his property before the agent got there, which I wasn't happy about. And they became buddy, started talking. Next thing you know, my seller's telling the guy what he's willing to take and all this stuff. And then he called me and he's upset because they wrote an offer at that. I said, are you kidding me now? You basically told them what you were willing to do. I said, I'm going to do what I can to fix it, but I don't know that I can, right? So we ended up taking exactly the offer that he told the buyers that he would be willing to take. And then he was all pissed off. I'm like, you can't be mad when you did exactly what I told you not to do, right? So, and you guys, here's the thing. Some of you are not helping your buyers and your sellers understand what you actually are doing. Like I went to him and I said, look, this is where I'm really good. And you just threw yourself in front of the bus. I'm a great negotiator, but you took that power away from me. And I said, so you can't be frustrated or upset when you don't get the price that you were wanting because you already threw yourself in front of the bus. Now, I will be as blunt with people like that in those situations because they also need to understand, right? They need to understand what we're doing and what's going on behind the scenes. And many times what I'll do too is we just had this happen on the same client, but the house was supposed to be sold as is. He was like, well, now that I went down to that price, I'm not willing to change. I'm not willing to do nothing. I'm like, well, you have already hung yourself. So what happened? We ended up getting a $6,000 request for repairs, right? Pest report and seller credit for buyer's closing costs and all that. And so he goes, I can't believe they're asking that. I go, let me go see what I can work out and negotiate. Well, I was able to negotiate where he only had to pay $1,500 out of the $6,000. But I told him, zip it. Like, you say nothing. Don't talk to the buyers, nothing, right? And a lot of times when it comes to negotiating, the best thing you can do is everyone loves to win. Everyone loves to feel like they got something. So I always try to do things where it says where we meet in the middle, right? So a buyer, for example, needs $5,000 in closing costs. I'll say, well, hey, let's go ask the seller for $8,000. Odds are the seller at $8,000 is not going to do $8,000 in closing costs, but guess what? They'll probably come back at $4,000. And guess what? Now we got our buyer $4,000 in closing costs. They were happy. They wanted $5,000, but we've met in the middle and we've made it work. So always overestimate what you're trying to get so that you can make it work. Now you look like a hero, right? Well, hey, I wasn't able to get $5,000, but I did get you $4,000, you know, or different things like that. You can work out these different ways to negotiate. So those are all things that you can do to make sure that you're negotiating closing costs. When this particular client came back and asked for a reduced commission, I go, you don't really understand how hard we work. And he goes, well, you haven't really done anything. And I said, well, there's a lot still to make this deal happen. Just putting a sign in the yard is not all there is, right? So we agreed to go from 6 to 5. And then guess what? Partway through the deal, when he realized how hard we work, he goes, okay, we can go to 6. Right? So there's lots of opportunities that you can do to keep from reducing your commission. But the biggest mistake that I see and the biggest reason concessions are made is because nobody did a proper net sheet up front. Nobody asked the questions that you should have asked to make sure that the numbers ended up being the numbers that they should be. Does that make sense? What kind of questions you guys have? Any? No? All right. Well, we're going to wrap this thing up. This is posted in one of our Facebook groups, I think. So I will see what I can do to get you guys the worksheet that I have and post that out. If you guys will email me or PM me, not here on this chat because this chat closes down, then I'm happy to send you the estimated seller net sheet checklist that I've created. And it's editable, so you guys can go in and edit, make it, update it for your area, for your market, put your information on it. So, all right, everybody, have a fabulous day. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Marguerite.
Thank you.
Bye.